All right. Well, I'm sitting here today and I was listening to shit going down the road. And people oftentimes talk about manufacturing consent from Noam Chomsky. But I'll be honest with you. I really think that a more important book for everybody to be talking about and reading and understanding is Edward Bernays' Propaganda. Now, I've already done two videos. We're up to chapter 4 on this book. I apologize, man. I be slacking on my. And look, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get paid for this shit. You know what I mean? Like, yo, join a goddamn Patreon. You know what I'm saying? Help a brother out. I don't put out no exclusive content. Everybody gets to see everything. Just how I feel about stuff. So, here's what we're going to do. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get through a couple of these chapters tonight. You know what I mean? And then y'all have something decent to listen to tomorrow. I mean, while you're working or whatever the case might be. You know, I do this for y'all. Listen to the first two videos first. And I mean, I got about already an hour's worth of content just from this book right here. And this is a highly important thing. This will lift the mask off of the media as a whole. So let's get to it. All right, chapter 4, the psychology of public relations. The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government to society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man in the group. Trotter and Laban, who approached the subject in a scientific manner, and Graham Wallace, Walter Lippmann, and others who continue researching studies of the group mind, established that the group has mental characteristics distinguished from those of the individual, and it is motivated by impulse and emotions, but cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. So the impulses and so the question naturally arose: if we understood the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it? The recent practice of propaganda has proved that it is possible, at least up to a certain point within certain limits. Mass psychology is yet far from being an exact science, and the mysteries of human motivation are by no means all revealed, but at least theory and practice have combined with sufficient success to permit us to know that in certain cases we can effect some change in public opinion with a fair degree of accuracy by operating a certain mechanism, just as the motorist can regulate the speed of his car by manipulating the flow of gasoline. Let me be honest here, that's not really how it works, right? Like, that's not really a gas pedal, that's an air pedal, right? Just putting that out there. You know what I mean? Really, you're putting more air into the gasoline mixture. I mean, it tends to be how it works. Like, yes, you can add more fuel, but, you know, I mean, ultimately, like, really what it is you're adding more air into the mixture. But anyway, right. Propaganda is a mechanism. Oh, wait. All right. Propaganda is not a science in the laboratory sense, but it's no longer entirely the imperial affair that it was before the advent of the study of mass psychology. Is now scientific in the sense that it seeks to use its base of operations upon definite knowledge drawn from direct observation of the group mind, mm. and upon the application of principles which has been demonstrated to be consistent and relatively constant. So basically, what he's saying here is that, look, we know how to do this, right? And we can do this on a large scale. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of important for everybody to really understand exactly what's, being said in this book right here. Because once you understand what they're doing, you can see them when they do it. You understand where I'm at with that? I think that's really important. That's the whole purpose of this series right here, is so that you can recognize when they're gaming you, right? So that you don't get gamed, right? The modern propaganda studies systematically and objectively the material from which he is working in the spirit of a laboratory. If the matter at hand is nationwide sales campaign, he studied the fields by means of clipping service or a corps of scouts or by personal study at a crucial spot. He determines, for example, which features of a product are losing their public appeal and what new direction the public taste is veering. He will not fail to investigate to what extent it is the wife who has the final word in the choice of the husband's car or of his suits and shirts. Scientific accuracy of the results may not be expected because many of the elements of the situation must always be beyond his control. He may know with a fair degree of certainty that under favorable circumstances, an international flight will produce a spirit of goodwill, making possible the consummation of political programs. But he cannot be sure that some unexpected event will not overshadow his flight in the public interest, or that some other aviator may not do something more spectacular the day before. Even in this restricted field of public psychology, there must always be a wide margin of error. Propaganda, like economics and sociology, can never be an exact science for the reason that it's a subject matter like theirs deals with human beings. So basically, right, he's saying, look, you know what I mean? Understand something. We know that, like, legitimately, like, when it comes down to it, like, yo, your wife's going to be the one picking out the car. It's your wife who's going to be picking out your suits, right? And even if you don't have a wife, there's still going to be a female involved because that's what you're trying, you know what I'm saying, impress with these type of things. So if you can influence the leaders without either with or without their conscious cooperation, you may automatically influence the group to which they sway. But men do not need to be actually gathered together in a public meeting or in a street riot to be subject to the influences of mass psychology. Because man by nature is as gregarious as he feels himself to be a member of the herd, even when he is alone in his room with the curtains drawn. His mind retains the patterns which he has been stamped on him by group influences. A man sits in his office deciding what stocks to buy. He imagines no doubt that he is planning his purchases according to his own judgment, but in actual fact, his judgment is a melange of impressions stamped because it was in the headlines yesterday, and hence once it becomes the most prominent to his mind because he has a pleasant recollection of a good dinner with one of its fast trains because of its liberal labor policy, a reputation for honesty because he's been told that J.P. Morgan owns some of its shares. Right? Understand something. Like, yo, what they're saying is you already made that decision. Right? Like, yo, we made that decision for you. You don't even know it. But when the example of the leader is not, Trotter and Laban concluded that the group mind is not think in the strict sense of the word. In place of its thoughts, it has impulses, habits, and emotions. In making up its mind, its first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader. This is one of the most firmly established principles in mass psychology. It operates by establishing the rising or diminishing prestige of a summer resort and causing a man to run on a bank or in panic and causing a run on the bank or panic in the stock exchange, creating a bestseller or a box office success. But when the example of the leader is not at hand and the herd must think for itself, it does so by means of cliches, patwords, or images, which stand for a whole group of ideas or experiences. Not many years ago, it was only necessary to tag a political candidate with the word interest to stampede millions of people into voting against him, because saying anything associated with the interest seemed necessarily corrupt. Recently, the word Bolshevik has performed the same similar service for persons who wish to frighten the public away from the line of action. And they do the same thing today with racists, xenophobes, Russians, things of this nature, right? Because that's all you really have to do is say that word, and all of a sudden there's negative connotation to that individual the moment you end up associating them with that. All right, so by playing upon an old cliche or manipulating a new one, the propagandist can sometimes swing a whole massive group of emotions. In Great Britain during the war, the evacuations hospitals came in a considerable amount of criticism because of the summary way in which they handled their wounded. It was assumed by the public that a hospital gives prolonged and conscientious attention to its patients. When the name was changed to evacuation post, the critical reaction vanished. No one expected more than adequate emergency treatment from an institution renamed, or so named. The cliche hospital was endemically associated in the public mind with a certain picture. To persuade the public to discriminate between one type of hospital and another, to disassociate the cliche from the picture to vote, would have been an impossible task. Instead, a new cliche automatically conditioned the public emotions towards these hospitals. Man, listen, it's weird, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I be trying to tell niggas, like, oh, this critical race theory, postmodern, is nonsense, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is 1928. You know what I'm saying? Like, real shit. Like, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm over here and I'm like, yo, look, I have been reading about this shit for years. You know what I mean? From people who were around well before all this established doctrine came to be. And people don't understand that, you know what I mean? Like, this here is, it's something else completely. Anyway, right? So men are rarely aware of the real reasons which motivate their actions. A man may believe that he buys a motor car because he carefully studied the technical features of all makes on the market. He has concluded that this is the best. He almost certainly fooling himself. He bought it perhaps because a friend whose financial acumen he respects bought one last week, or because his neighbors believed he was not able to afford a car of that class, or because those colors are of his college fraternity. It is chiefly the psychologists of the school of Freud who have pointed out that many of the man's thoughts and actions are compensatory substitutes for desires, which he has been obligated to suppress. A thing may be desired not for its intrinsic worth or for usefulness, but because he has consciously come to see it as a symbol of something else, the desire for which he's ashamed to admit himself. A man buying a car may think he wants it for the purposes of locomotion, whereas the fact may be that he really would prefer not to be burdened with it, and would rather walk for the sake of his health. He may really want it because a symbol of social position and evidence of his success in business or of a means of pleasing his wife. Like, yo, legit, 1928. Long before the automobile became, it was big at this point, but it wasn't, nowhere near where we are today. These individuals understood this back then. These people have been standing here pushing your buttons for years and y'all have no idea about it. This general principle that men are largely actuated by motives of which they conceal from themselves is as true as a mass of individual psychology. It is evident that successful propagandists must understand the true motives and not be content to accept the reasons which men give for what they do. Oh, they got you, man. You know what I'm saying? But here, I'm gonna show you what they do to you, and that way, when you see them do it, you can go, oh, and then you cannot be caught in by their bullshit. It is not sufficient to understand only the mechanical structure of society. The groupings and cleavages and loyalties, as an engineer may know all about the cylinders and pistons of a locomotive, but unless he knows how the steam behaves under pressure, he cannot make his engine run. Human desires are the steam which makes a social machine work. Only by understanding them can the propagandist control the vast, loose-joined mechanism which is modern society. The old propagandist based his work on the mechanistic reaction psychology when in vogue of our colleges. This assumed that the human mind was merely an individual machine, a system of nerves and nerve centers reacting with the mechanical regularity of stimuli, like a helpless, willless automation. It was a special Preter's function to provide the stimulus which would cause the desired reaction to the individual purchaser. I'm telling you, a lot of people think that individuals this, all this stuff that we're dealing with is new. It's really not. They've had you for years and you had no idea about it. So it was one of the doctrines of the reaction psychology that a certain stimulus, often repeated, would create a habit. That mere reiteration of an idea would create a conviction. Suppose the old type of salesmanship acting for a meat packer was seeking to increase the sale of bacon. It would reiterate the numeral times a full page advertisement. Eat more bacon. Eat bacon because it's cheap, because it's good, because it gives you reserve energy. The new salesmanship, understanding the group structure of society and the principles of mass psychology, would just ask, who is it that influences the eating habits of the public? The answer obviously is the physicians. The new salesman will suggest that the physicians to say publicly that this is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors because he understands the psychological relation of dependence of men upon their physicians. And legitimately, this is the reason why we eat bacon. This guy right here, right? This dude legitimately introduced the idea of bacon in breakfast. He's the reason why you eat bacon as a whole. Because it was basically, how do I put this? It was basically like a rich person's food back in the day. Or it was not considered something, it was considered a waste product, right? Until this dude got a hold of it and turned it into something that you associate with breakfast, right? It was the reason, and how he did that was he had doctors out here telling individuals on commercials that bacon is good for you. This is legitimate. This is the same dude who he got all the women in America to smoke because he associated the cigarettes with feminism. This dude is fucking brilliant, right? But understand something. All their work is based off of him. You understand him, you can understand what they do to you. You can understand how to make your own moves and stand here and make people do what the fuck it is you want them to do. Well, I'm reading this to you. The old-fashioned propagandists, using almost exclusively the appeal of the printed word, tried to persuade the individual reader to buy a definite article immediately. This approach is exemplified in the type of advertisement which used to be considered ideal from the point of view of directness and effectiveness. You, perhaps with a finger pointing at the reader, buy O'Leary's rubber heels now. The advertiser sought by means of a reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual to break down or penetrate sales resistance. Although the appeal was aimed at the 50 million persons, it was aimed at each as an individual. The new salesmanship has found it possible by dealing with men in the mass through their group formations to set up psychological and emotional current events that will work for him. Instead of assaulting sales resistance by direct attack, he is interested by removing the sales resistance. He is interested in removing sales resistance. He creates circumstances which will swing emotional currents so as to make a purchase. Yeah, so as to make a purchaser demand. I apologize, man. It's like covered up with red. I couldn't see it. If, for instance, I want to sell pianos, this is important. I'm probably read this twice to you, right? If, for instance, if I want to sell pianos, it is not sufficient to blanket the country with a direct appeal such as, you buy a Mozart piano now, it's cheap, the best artists use it, it will last for years. The claims may all be true, but they are in direct conflict with the claims of other piano manufacturers and in direct competition with the claims of a radio or a motor car, each competing for the consumer's dollar. What are the true reasons the purchaser is planning to spend his money on a new car instead of a new piano? Because he decided that he wanted the commodity called locomotion more than he wants the commodity called music. Not altogether. He buys a car because at the moment the group customs to buy cars. The modern propagandist, hang on, therefore sets to work creating circumstances which will modify that custom. He appeals perhaps to the home instinct, which is fundamental. He will endeavor to develop public acceptance of the idea of a music room in a house. This he may do, for example, by organizing exhibition of period music rooms designed to be well-known decorators who themselves exert an influence in the buying groups. He enhances the effectiveness and prestige of these rooms by putting them in rare and valuable tapestries. Then, in order to create thematic interest in the exhibit, he stages an event or ceremony. To this ceremony, key people, persons known to influence the buying habits of the public, such as a famous violinist, a popular artist, a society leader, are invited. These key persons affect other groups, lifting the idea of the music room to the place in the public consciousness which it did not have before. The juxtaposition of these leaders and the idea in which they are dramatizing and projected to the wider public through various publicity channels. Meanwhile, the influential architects have been persuaded to make the music room an integral part, right? Architectural part of their plans, perhaps a specifically charming niche in the corner for the piano. Less influential architects will, as a matter of course, intimate what is done by the men whom they consider masters of their profession. They, in turn, will implant the idea of a music room in the mind of the general public. All right, so the music room will be accepted because it has been made the thing, and the man or the woman who has the music room, who has arranged a corner of the parlor as a music corner, will naturally think of buying a piano. It will come to him as his own idea. That's fucking brilliant. He didn't sell you a goddamn fucking piano. He sold you a whole fucking ideology of having a whole new room in your home just for that piano, so that you would buy it. That's propaganda. That's how you do it, right? So under the old salesmanship, the manufacturer said to the prospective purchasers, please buy a piano. The new salesmanship has reversed the process and calls the prospective purchaser to say to the manufacturer, please sell me a piano. The value of the associative processes in propaganda is shown in connection with the large real estate development to emphasize that Jackson Heights was socially desirable. Every attempt was made to produce the Associated Press to benefit performance of jitney players, which was staged for the benefit of the earthquake victims in Japan. Under the auspices of Mr. Astor and others, social advantages of the place were projected. A golf course was laid out in a clubhouse plan. When the post office was opened, the Public Relations Council attempted to use it as a focus for national interest and discovered that its opening fell coincident with a date important to the annals of American Postal Service, which was then made the basis of the opening. When an attempt was made to show the public beauty of the apartments, a competition was held among interior decorators for the best furnished apartments in Jackson Heights. An important committee of judges decided this competition drew the approval of well-known authorities. as well as the interest of millions who were made cognizant of it through newspaper and magazine and other publicity, with the effect of building up definitely the prestige of the development. One of the most effective methods is the utilization of the group formation of modern society in order to spread ideas. An example of this nationwide competitions for sculpture and ivory soap open to school children in certain age groups as well as professional sculptors. A sculptor of national reputation found ivory soap an excellent medium for sculpture. The Procter and Gamble Company, offered a series of prizes for the best sculpture in white soap. The contest was held under the auspices of the Art Center in New York City, an organization of high standing in the art world. School superintendents and teachers throughout the country were glad to encourage the movement as an education aid for schools. Practice among school children as part of their art courses was stimulated. Contests were held between schools, between school districts, and between cities. Ivory soap was adaptable for sculpting the homes because the mothers saved the shavings for imperfect efforts for laundry purposes. The work itself was clean. The breast pieces were selected from the local competitions for entry in national contests. This is held annually in an important art gallery in New York, whose procedure that distinguished judges established the contents as a serious art event. In the first of these national competitions, about 500 pieces of sculpture were entered. In the third, 2,500. In the fourth, more than 4,000. If the carefully selected pieces were so numerous, it is evident that a vast number were sculpted during the year, and that much greater must have been made for practice purposes. The goodwill has greatly enhanced by the fact that the soap has become not merely the concern for the housewife, but also a matter of personal and intimate interest to her children. A number of familiar psychological motives were set in motion in the carrying out of this campaign. The aesthetic, the competitive, the gregarious. Much of the sculpting was done in the school groups, the snobbish, the impulses to follow the example of a recognized leader, the exhibitionist, and last but by no means least, the material. All of these motives, and group habits were put into concerted motion by the simple machinery of group leadership and authority. If actuated by the pressure of a button, people began working for the client's sake of the gratification obtained by the sculpture of the work itself. This point is important in successful propaganda work. The leaders who lend their authority to any propaganda campaign will do so only if it can be made in touch with their own interest. This must be disinterested aspect of the propagandist activities. In other words, it is one of the functions of the Public Relations Counsel to discover at what point his client's interests coincide with those of other individuals and groups. In the case of the soap sculpture competition, the distinguished artists and educators who sponsored the idea were glad to lend their services and names because the competitions promoted the interests which they all had at heart: cultivation of the aesthetic impulse among younger generations. Such coincidence and overlapping of interests is as infinite and interlacing as the group of formations themselves. For example, a railway wishes to develop its business. The Council on Public Relations makes a survey to discover at what point its interests coincide with those of prospective customers. The company then establishes relations with chambers of commerce along the right-of-way and assists them in developing in their communities. It helps them to secure new plants and industries for the town. It facilitates business through the dissemination of technical formation. It's not merely a case of bestowing favors in the hope of receiving favors. These activities of the railroads, besides creating goodwill, actually promote growth of the right-of-the-way. The interests of the railroads and the communities through which it passes mutually interact and feed one another. In the same way, a bank institutes an investment service or for the benefits of its customers in order for that the later may have more money to deposit with the bank. Or a jewelry concern develops an insurance department to insure jewels it sells in order to make the purchaser feel greater security in buying jewels. Or baking company established a information service for suggesting recipes for bread and to encourage new uses for the bread in the home. The idea of new propaganda is predicated on sound psychology based on enlightened self-interest. I have tried in these chapters to explain the place of propaganda in modern American life, and something by methods of which it operates to tell the why, the what, the who, and the how of the invisible government which dictates our thoughts, directs our feelings, controls our actions. In the following chapters, I shall try to show how propaganda functions in specific departments of group activities or suggest some of the further ways in which it may operate. This is high-level shit, my friend. Legitimately. Suggest you go back and watch the first two videos and understand something. This is something that you probably don't understand as a whole, and it's cool. You're not supposed to. All right, because like yo, you've never been told about this. We're not educated properly, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you get educated properly, legit. Like that is really my job right now. Help you, you know what I'm saying, legitimately become more intelligent through watching my content because that's what I really want. You know what I mean? Like yo, that's really, you know what I'm saying, like what the entirety of what the media is supposed to do is supposed to be, you know what I mean, there to help, you know what I mean, form a well-educated public. So chapter 5, business and the public. The relationship between business and the public has become closer in the past few decades. Business today is taking the public into partnership. A number of causes, some economic, others due to growing public understanding of business and the public interest in business, have produced this situation. Business realizes that its relationship to the public is not confined to the manufacture and sale of a given product, but includes at the same time the selling of itself and all those things for which it stands in public mind. 20 or 25 years ago, business sought to run its own affairs regardless of the public. The reaction was the muckraking period, in which the multiple sins were justly and unjustly laid in the charge of the interest. In the, in the face of aroused public consciousness, and the large corporations were obliged to renounce their contention that the affairs were nobody's business. If today big business were to seek to throttle the public, the new reaction, similar to that of 20 years ago, would be to take place, and the public would rise to try and throttle big business with restrictive laws. Business is conscious of the public's conscious. Consciousness has led to a healthy cooperation. Another cause for increasing in relationship is undoubtedly to found in the various phenomena growing out of the mass production. Mass production is only profitable if its rhythm can be maintained. That is if it continues to sell its product in a steady and increasing quantity. The result is that while under the handicraft of small unit system of production that was typical a century ago, demand created the supply day to day. Today, supply must be actively seek to create its corresponding demand. A single factory potentially capable of supplying a whole continent with its particular product, right, cannot afford to wait until the public asks for its product. It must maintain constant touch through advertising and propaganda with the vast public in order to assure itself the continuous demand which alone will make the costly plant profitable. This entails a vastly more complex system of distribution than formerly. To make customers is the new problem. One must understand that not only his own business, the manufacturer of a particular product, but also the structure, the personality, and the prejudices of potentially universal public. Still another reason to be found in the improvement of the technique of advertising as regards of both the sides of the public, which can be reached by the printed word and the methods of appeal, the growth of newspaper magazines having a circulations of millions of copies, and the art of the modern advertising expert in making the printed message attractive and persuasive, have placed the businessman in personal relation with the vast diversified public. Like, now there's way more options. Another modern phenomenon which influences the general policy of big business is a new competition between certain firms and the remainder of the industry to which they belong. Another kind of competition between the whole industries and their struggle for a share of the consumer's dollar. When, for example, a soap manufacturer claims that his product will preserve youth, he is obviously attempting to change the public mode of thinking about soap in general, a thing of grave importance to the whole industry. Or when the metal furniture industry seeks to convince the public that it's more desirable to spend its money for metal furniture than for wood, it's clearly seeking to alter the taste standards of the whole generation. In either case, business is seeking to inject itself into the lives and customs of millions of persons. Hang on. Even in a basic sense, business is becoming dependent on public opinion. With the increasing volume and wider diffusion of wealth in America, thousands of persons now invest in industrial stocks. Yet new stock or bond flotations upon which the expanding a business must depend on for its success must be affected only if the concern has understood how to gain confidence in the goodwill of the general public. Business must express itself in its entire corporate existence so that the public will understand and accept it. It must dramatize its personality and interpret its objectives in very particular, which comes into contact with the community or the nation of which it is a part. Sound familiar? Let me read that again. Business must express itself in its entire corporate existence so that the public will understand and accept it. It must dramatize its personality and interpret its objectives in every particular in which it comes in contact with the community or the nation of which it is a part. 1928, folks. An oil corporation which truly understands its many-sided relation to the public will offer the public not only good oil, but a sound labor policy. A bank will seek to show not only that its management is sound and conservative, but also that its officers are honorable both with the public and the private life. A store specializing in fashionable men's clothing will express in its architecture and authenticity of its good it offers. A bakery will seek to impress the public with the hygienic care observed of its manufacturing process, not only by wrapping its loaves in dust-proof paper and throwing its factory open to the public inspection, but also with the cleanliness and attractiveness of its delivery wagons. A construction firm will take care that the public knows not only that its buildings are durable and safe, but also that its employees, while injured at work, are compensated. At whatever point a business enterprise impinges on the public consciousness, it must seek to give its public relations the particular character in which it will conform the objectives of which it's pursuing. Just as the production manager must be familiar with every element and detail concerning the materials in which he is working, so the man in charge of a firm's public relations must be familiar with the structure, the prejudices, and the whims of the general public. He must handle his problems with the utmost care. The public has its own standards and demands and habits. You may modify them, but you dare not run counter to them. You cannot persuade a whole generation of women to wear long skirts, but you may, by working through leaders of fashion, persuade them to wear evening dresses which are long in the back. The public is not an amorphous mass, but it can be molded at will or dictated to. Is not an amorphous mass which can be molded at will or dictated to. Both the business and public had their own personalities, which must somehow be brought into friendly agreement. Conflict and suspicion are injurious to both. Modern businesses must study on what terms the partnerships can be made amicable and mutually beneficial. It must explain itself, its aims, its objectives to the public in terms which the public can understand and is willing to accept. Business does not willingly accept dictation from the public. It should not expect that it can dictate to the public. While the public should appreciate the great economic benefits which business offers, thanks to the mass production, scientific marketing, businesses should also associate the public in becoming increasingly discriminative in its standards and should seek to understand its demands and to meet them. The relationship between the public and can be healthy only if its relationship is give and take. It is this condition and necessity which has created the need for a specialized field of public relation. Business now calls for the Public Relations Council to advise it, interpret its purpose to the public, and to suggest those modifications which it may make to conform to the public demand. Again, any of this sounded familiar, friends? The modifications have recommended to make businesses conform to its objectives and to the public demand may concern to the broadest matters of the policy, or for apparently the most trivial details of execution. It might in one case be necessary to transform entirely the line of goods sold to conform to changing public demands. In another case, trouble may be found to lie in such small matters as the dress of clerks. A jewelry store may complain that its patronage is shrinking upwards because of its reputation for carrying high-priced goods. If in this case, the Public Relations Council might suggest featuring medium-priced goods, even at a loss, not because the firm desires a large medium price trade as such, but because out of the 100 medium-priced customers acquired today, a certain percentage will be well-to-do 10 years from now. A department store which is seeking to gather in a high-class trade may be urged to employ college graduates as clerk, to engage to be well-known artists to design show windows or special exhibits. A bank may be urged to open on Fifth Avenue branch, not because the actual business done on Fifth Avenue warrants the expense, but because a beautiful Fifth Avenue office correctly expresses the kind of appeal it wishes to make to future depositors, and viewed in this way might be as important as that the doormen be polite, or that the floors be kept clean, and that the branch manager be able to be an able financier. Yet the beneficial effect of this branch angle may be canceled if the wife of the president is involved in a scandal. Big business studies every move in which may express its true personality. It seeks to tell the public in all appropriate ways and by the directed advertising message and the subtlest aesthetic suggestion that the quality of goods or services which it has to offer. A store seeks in large sales volume and cheap goods will preach prices day in and day out, concentrating its whole appeal in the ways that it can save money for its clients. But a store seeking a high margin of profit on individual sales would try to associate itself with the distinguished and elegant, whether by an exhibition of old masters or through the social activities of the owner's wife. Public relations activities of a business cannot be protective coloring to hide its real aims. It is a bad business as well as bad morals to feature exclusively high-class articles when the main stock of is of medium grade or cheap, or that the general impression given is a false one. A sound public relations policy will not attempt to stampede the public with exaggerating claims and false pretenses, but to interpret the individual business vividly and truly through every avenue that leads to the public opinion. The New York Central Railroad has for decades sought to appeal to the public not only on the basis of speed and safety of its train, but also on the basis of their elegance and comfort. It is appropriate that the corporation should have been personified in the great public, to the general public, in a person of so suave and ingratiating a gentleman as Chauncey Duple, an ideal window dressing for such an enterprise. All right, while the concrete recommendations of the Public Relations Council may infinitely, according to an individual's circumstances, his general plan of work may be reduced to two types, which I might term continuous interpretation and dramatization by high spotting. The two may be alternative, but to be pursued concurrently. Continuous interpretation is achieved by trying to control every aspect of the public mind in which a manner in which the public receives a desired impression, often without being conscious of it. High spotting, on the other hand, vividly seizes the attention of the public and fixes it upon some detail or aspect, which is typical of the entire enterprise. When a real estate corporation, which is erecting tall office buildings, makes it 10 feet taller than the highest skyscraper in existence, that is dramatization. Yo. Which method is indicated on whether both can be indicated concurrently can be determined only after a full study of objectives and specific possibilities. Another interesting case of focusing public attention on the virtues of a product was shown in the case of gelatin, and its advantage in increasing the digestibility and nutritional value of milk were proven at the Mellon Institute of Industrial Research. The suggestion was made and carried out that further this knowledge, gelatin to be used in certain hospitals and school systems to be tested out there. The favorable results of which such tests were then projected upon other leaders in the field, which the result they followed a group leadership and utilized gelatin for the scientific purposes which have been proven sound at the research institution. The idea carried momentum. The tendency of big businesses is to get bigger. Through mergers and monopolies, it is constantly increasing the number of persons to whom it is in direct contact. All of this has intensified and manipulated the public relationships of business. The responsibilities are of many kinds. The responsibility of stockholders, numbering perhaps 5 persons of 500, 500,000, who have entrusted their money to the concern and have the right to know how the money is being used. A concern which is fully aware of its responsibility towards the stockholders, which will furnish them with frequent letters urging them to use the product in which their money is invested and use their influence to promote its sale. It is a responsibility towards a dealer, which it may express by inviting him at his expense to visit the home factory. It has a responsibility towards the industry as a whole, which should restrain it from making exaggerated and unfair selling claims. It has a responsibility towards a retailer, who will see to it that its salesmen express the quality of the product of which they have to sell. There is a responsibility towards a consumer, who is impressed by a clean and well-managed factory, open to his inspection, and a general public, apart from its function, its potential customer. It is influenced in its attitude towards a concern by what it knows of its concern's financial dealings, its labor policy, even by the livableness of the houses in which its employees dwell. There is no detail too trivial to influence the public in a favorable or unfavorable sense. The personality of the president may be a matter of importance, but he perhaps dramatizes the whole concern to the public. It may be very important to what charities he contributes and to what civic societies he holds office. If he is a leader in his industry, the public may demand that he be a leader in his communities. The businessman has also become a responsible member of the social group. It is not question of ballyhoo of creating a picturesque fiction for public consumption. It is merely a question of finding the appropriate modes of expressing the personality that is to be dramatized. Some businessmen can be their own best public relations counsel, but in the majority of cases, knowledge in the public mind and the ways in which it will react to appeal is a specialized function which may be undertaken by the professional expert. And listen, how long is this goddamn chapter? Holy crap, it is really, really long. Like, yo, man, listen. Unbelievably long. Legit. I don't even know where I was at. I'm going to tell you what, folks. It's about 40 minutes. I'm going to end it right here. But legitimately, let's be honest here. Okay? There's a lot of information here, but it's a great thing for all you individuals. You know what I'm saying? Legit. And, you know what I'm saying? We'll pick this up, you know what I mean, another time, maybe later on this week. We'll see what's going on. Probably this weekend I'll do another video on this. And I might even cover another chapter in Machiavelli's The Art of War. You know what I mean? It's kind of important we do all these type of things. But in the meantime, man, you know the deal. I'm Tom Pease. Like, share, and subscribe. Hit that Patreon button, help me the fuck out. Hit that Streamlabs button. Donate directly. You know what I mean? Like, yo, just give me a shout out. You know what I mean? I'll read your message on the next live stream. All right? Tom Pease. Peace.